When my greedy daughter-in-law said I wasn't welcome at the Mother's Day celebration, I thought she was joking. Her voice was sweet like honey left out too long, thick, sticky, and impossible to swallow. "It's just going to be small this year, Margaret," she said over the phone. "You understand, right? It'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. Everyone but me." I stood there holding the receiver, staring at the vase of fading carnations on my kitchen counter. The same flowers my son had sent me last Mother's Day. This year, no card, no call from him, just her voice, polished and fake, telling me to stay home. For 40 years I've hosted that celebration in this very house. The smell of roasted chicken, the laughter of my grandkids running down the hallway, the way my late husband used to kiss my cheek before the meal began. Those were my traditions. My heartbeats. My proof that I belonged. But now the only sound was the clock ticking too loudly. The table was still set for 4 out of habit. The good china gleamed under the kitchen light, waiting for hands that would never touch it again. I almost called her back. Almost asked why. But the words sat heavy on my tongue. What would I even say? "Please let me come?" No. I was too old to beg for a seat at a table I built with my own hands. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. The lilacs were in bloom, bright, beautiful, and lonely. I thought about the picture she'd posted last year. 3 generations of strong women, she'd written. My son, his wife, and my granddaughter smiling at the camera. My name wasn't even tagged. I told myself this year would be different. That maybe they'd surprise me. That maybe the card was just delayed in the mail. But when Sunday came, all I got was silence. The mailman passed by without stopping. My phone didn't ring. At noon, I brewed a cup of tea and set 1 extra cup across from me out of habit. The chair creaked the way it always did when my husband sat there. I could almost hear him say, "Don't wait too long, Maggie. They've made their choice." Outside, the sun was bright, almost mocking in its warmth. I scrolled through my phone and there it was, a photo already getting likes. My son, my daughter-in-law, and my granddaughter at a restaurant I'd recommended years ago. The caption read, "Blessed to celebrate with family." Family. That word used to mean something. I placed my phone face down and took a slow sip of tea. The silence pressed against me like heavy wool. Then for the first time in years I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing in the scent of lilacs through the open window, realizing that love doesn't always mean belonging. "I'm glad to have you here," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Follow my story until the end so you'll understand how I stopped waiting for their love, and found my own peace instead." The next morning the house felt heavier than it had in years. The smell of yesterday's tea still lingered in the air, faint and stale. Sunlight crept across the kitchen floor, tracing every crumb I hadn't bothered to sweep. My table, once the heart of every family gathering, looked like a stage after the curtain had fallen. Empty cups. Cold silence. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching the back of each chair, the piano keys that hadn't been pressed since my husband passed. The framed photos on the wall stared back at me. Our wedding day, my son's graduation, his first Father's Day with his newborn daughter. All frozen in time, all smiling at something that no longer existed. I stopped at one picture. Me holding my granddaughter Emma at her first birthday party. She was giggling, frosting on her tiny fingers. My daughter-in-law had taken that photo. She'd even said, "You're such a wonderful grandma." Back then I believed her. Now even thinking of that moment felt like remembering a stranger's life. Outside the world went on as if nothing had changed. Neighbors waved as they walked their dogs, kids rode their bikes past my porch. I smiled back, of course. I always smile. It's easier than explaining why my family never visits. I made myself a sandwich and turned on the radio. A talk show host was chatting about cherishing your loved ones while you can. I laughed softly, not because it was funny but because it was too late. By afternoon I found myself scrolling through social media again. The photo from yesterday had nearly 100 likes now. My daughter-in-law's caption had grown longer. Grateful for another beautiful Mother's Day surrounded by love and laughter. I zoomed in on the picture. Behind the smiling faces I noticed something odd. The tablecloth, the dishes, even the vase of lilacs. They looked familiar. It was my dining set. My lilacs. My vase. I blinked, heart thudding quietly. They'd borrowed everything from my home. Probably sent my son to pick it up while I was at the grocery store last week. I hadn't even noticed. I sat down, breathing slowly, feeling the hurt settle not like fire but like frost. quiet, fretting. For a long time I stared out the window. The garden was alive with color, the lilacs trembling in the breeze. My husband used to say flowers bloom even when no one's watching. Maybe that was a kind of strength, blooming anyway. I wrote one sentence on the back of a grocery list. Next year I'll host my own celebration. Not for them. Not for anyone's approval. Just for me. Then I folded the note, tucked it between the pages of our old family album and whispered, "Happy Mother's Day, Maggie." And for the first time in years it actually felt true. A few days after Mother's Day I found myself dusting the hallway shelves, though they didn't need it. That's what I do when my thoughts get too loud. Clean, rearrange, pretend I still have purpose. The rag caught on a picture frame and suddenly I was staring at Christmas 3 years ago. That was the first time they forgot to invite me. My son had said it was a small dinner, just a few friends. Later I saw the photos online. 12 people, matching sweaters, even my sister Ruth. She'd called afterward, voice nervous, saying, "Oh honey, I thought you decided not to come." I told her it was fine. It always was. Then came Emma's 5th birthday. I remember wrapping a doll, tying it with a silver ribbon, driving 40 minutes to their house. I'd even baked cupcakes with her favorite pink frosting. When I got there, my daughter-in-law met me at the door, smiling too wide. "Oh Margaret, I'm so sorry you didn't get the message. We moved the party to tomorrow." Behind her, I could hear the laughter of children, the sound of balloons brushing the ceiling. She closed the door gently, like she was afraid of bruising me. That night I ate one of those cupcakes alone. Tasted like powdered sugar and shame. After that I stopped asking questions. When Thanksgiving rolled around and they said, "We're spending it with her parents this year," I simply nodded. When my son forgot my birthday I pretended I had too. It's funny how silence becomes a kind of armor. Each slight, each missed call, adds another layer until nothing can touch you. Or at least you tell yourself that. Last winter I tried to send them a card. Just a simple note that said, "Thinking of you. Love, Mom." It came back 2 weeks later, unopened, stamped return to sender. I sat at the table that day and traced my name on the envelope. Margaret Lewis. Mother. Wanted. Sometimes I replay those moments, wondering when things started to change. Maybe it was when I paid off their mortgage or when I stopped being useful. Maybe love expires once you're no longer needed. People like to say family is forever. But they don't tell you it can fade quietly, not with shouting or betrayal, but with a slow closing of doors and hearts. As I put the photo frame back on the shelf, a layer of dust still clung to my fingertips. I didn't wipe it off. I left it there. A reminder that even the things you try hardest to keep clean will still gather dust when no one visits anymore. And yet somehow that truth didn't break me. It set me free. I used to think my daughter-in-law Hannah was kind. She had that polished charm that fooled everyone. The soft voice, the perfect posture, the way she called me Mom in front of others, as if affection could be performed like a play. For years I mistook manners for love. The first time I saw what hid beneath her smile was a Sunday afternoon, right after my husband's funeral. She'd come over with a casserole and a bottle of wine. "You shouldn't be alone," she said, slipping off her shoes like she owned the place. I remember thanking her, telling her I was grateful for her company. But as I poured tea, she was already walking through the house, her eyes scanning the furniture, the photos, the details that weren't hers yet. "This place must feel so empty without him," she sighed, running her hand across the mantel. "You know, it might be too much for one person to keep up." I nodded, not catching the edge in her tone until much later. After that day she visited often, always with a reason. Sometimes to help with bills, sometimes to organize my papers. My son said she was being thoughtful, but I could feel something shifting, like a slow rearranging of my life behind my back. She'd start small, moving a vase, throwing out an old blanket, until the house began to look less like mine and more like hers. One afternoon I overheard her whispering on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "She still keeps everything in her name. Yes, even the house." I stepped into the hallway and she smiled when she saw me, quick as a mask snapping into place. "Just ordering flowers," she said. "For you." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. But the little things piled up. My son's visits grew shorter, his words rehearsed. "You know Hannah just wants the best for you, Mom." Whenever he said it, I heard it like a line fed from her script. Last autumn she suggested I move into a senior community. She said it gently, like she was offering me a gift. You'd have company, activities, less stress, she explained. Then she added, and we could finally remodel this place. Make it family-friendly. I smiled because I knew what she meant. Family-friendly without me in it. I remember setting down my teacup carefully, afraid it might shatter under my hands. That's thoughtful, dear, I said. I'll think about it. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, listening to the refrigerator hum and the wind against the window panes. It was then I realized something simple but hard to swallow. Hannah wasn't stealing my things. She was stealing my place. And the cruelest part? She did it all while smiling. That night I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. I could almost hear my husband's voice echoing in the stillness. You've worked too hard, Maggie. One day they'll see everything you've done. But they never did. When my son was little, I worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I'd leave before dawn to clean offices downtown, then come home, make dinner, and sew clothes to sell on weekends. There were nights when my hands ached so badly I couldn't even grip a pen. Still, I'd pack his lunch, iron his shirts, and whisper, "You're going to have a better life than I did." Every penny I saved went into this house. The same one Hannah now calls too big for one person. My husband and I built it slowly, paycheck by paycheck, board by board. He laid the tiles in the kitchen himself. I painted the walls 3 times before they looked right. That's what love used to mean, doing small, hard things that no one ever noticed. When our son graduated college, I remember the look on his face. Pride, relief, maybe even guilt. We'd skipped vacations, sold my car, lived simply so he could have his degree. I thought that kind of sacrifice bound a family together. I thought love, once given, came back in some form. I was wrong. Sometimes when Hannah talks about modern families, she says it like tradition is a disease. She laughs when I tell her I keep old recipe cards from my mother. She once said, "You should digitize these. Paper fades, you know." I smiled, but inside I thought, so does gratitude. I still keep those recipe cards in a tin box under the sink. The handwriting is smudged, the ink fading in places, but I can trace each letter like a memory. My mother used to say that a woman's worth is measured in what she gives, not what she keeps. Maybe that's why I gave everything. My time, my youth, my patience. Until there was nothing left but the sound of others deciding what I should do with what's mine. When Hannah mentioned remodeling the house, she didn't mean fresh paint. She meant rewriting history. Erasing my fingerprints from the walls. Turning the home I built into a backdrop for her curated life. I looked at my hands last night, the same hands that cooked every meal, scrubbed every floor, wiped every tear from my son's face. They've grown thin now, lined with age spots and quiet strength. They tell stories no one asks to hear. But I know this much. Those hands built everything they now take for granted. I poured myself a cup of coffee and whispered into the empty room, "You can take the house. You can even take the memories. But you'll never own the love that built them." The walls didn't answer, but somehow that silence felt like agreement. A week after that quiet night, the mail came late. I almost didn't bother checking it. Most days it was just catalogs and reminders of things I didn't need. But that morning a thick envelope caught my eye. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, even though Mr. Lewis had been gone for 5 years. Inside were property tax documents, something Hannah usually insisted she handled for me. I never argued. It made her feel in control, and it saved me the headache of online forms I barely understood. But this time I looked closer. My name wasn't listed under owner. It was hers. For a moment I thought I was seeing things. I rubbed my eyes, checked again. There it was, clear as day, Hannah Lewis. No Margaret. No mention of me at all. I felt the air leave my lungs in one long, slow exhale. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd written tuition checks, holiday cards, and grocery lists for decades. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of it. How could my own house, my life's work, be under her name? Then I remembered the afternoon she'd brought over papers for the insurance update. I'd signed them, distracted, trusting her when she said it was routine. My son had been there too, holding their baby, smiling proudly. "Mom, Hannah's just trying to make things easier for everyone." Easier. That word again. Always easier for them. The papers must have been part of that moment. My signature was there, black ink on betrayal. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum, watching the light shift through the lace curtains. The room felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were shrinking away from me. For the first time, anger didn't come like fire. It came like ice. Slow. Precise. I reached for my phone and opened social media, not really knowing why. Maybe I needed to see their faces, to remind myself who I was dealing with. Hannah had just posted another picture. The three of them on the porch of my house, the caption reading, "Home sweet home. So grateful for new beginnings." The words stung more than any insult she'd ever spoken. I looked at the background, at the curtains I'd sewn myself, at the flower pot my husband painted the summer before he died. My life, my history, turned into props for her perfect little story. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Tears had lost their purpose. Instead, I picked up the envelope, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my cup of cold coffee. "You win for now," I whispered. My voice sounded steady, calm. Too calm. But deep inside something shifted. The kind of shift that happens when a person realizes they've been living someone else's version of their own life. For years I'd let politeness bury my instincts. I'd called it peace. I'd called it love. But what it really was surrender. And I was done surrendering. That night I didn't turn on the lights. The house glowed faintly from the street lamp outside, a pale wash of gold across the kitchen floor. I sat at the table with the envelope still in front of me. The one that told me, in official print and polite wording, that I no longer owned the place I'd built my life in. I kept tracing the letters of her name, Hannah Lewis. The ink felt heavier than it should have. My husband's handwriting used to fill this table. Grocery lists, love notes tucked under coffee cups, scribbled reminders about bills. Now all that was gone, and in its place was her signature. Smooth. Confident. Perfect. I tried to feel anger, but what came instead was a hollow ache. The kind that settles behind your ribs and won't leave. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but that's never been me. My mother raised me to be composed even when the world wasn't. "Grace costs nothing," she used to say. So I sat there in grace while everything I owned quietly slipped away. I thought about my son, how he'd once promised to take care of me, how his smile now felt rehearsed like an actor reading someone else's lines. Did he even realize what she'd done? Or was he just grateful not to think about it? I poured myself a small glass of wine, the last bottle from the year my husband passed. It tasted sharp, dry, almost bitter. "To you," I whispered to the empty chair across from me. "You'd probably tell me to pack up and start over. But where does a woman start over when the home she built has her name erased from its walls?" The clock ticked louder than usual. I could hear the refrigerator cycle off, the pipes hum quietly, the house settling in for the night. Funny, even as it betrayed me, the house still sounded alive. Maybe it remembered who cared for it all these years. I looked around, noticing details I'd long taken for granted. The crack in the tile near the stove, the uneven paint stroke behind the pantry door. My husband used to tease me about those imperfections. "They make it ours," he'd say. And now they were the only proof left that this place once belonged to us. As the hours passed, something inside me shifted. The ache turned cold. I realized the woman I used to be, the one who waited for apologies, who believed kindness could fix everything, was gone. In her place sat someone quieter, older, but strangely stronger. Maybe losing everything wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the final lesson. I stood, opened the window, and let the cool night air fill the room. The lilacs outside were in bloom again, same scent, same softness, but I smelled something else beneath it, the faint trace of freedom. I whispered into the darkness, "You took my house, Hannah, but you'll never own my peace." And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. Felt like an answer. The next morning, the sun came up sharp and clear, slicing through the kitchen blinds. I hadn't slept. The envelope was still there, right where I'd left it, a quiet reminder that even paper can carry cruelty. I poured myself a cup of coffee that had gone bitter overnight and sat down again, not to mourn this time, but to think. That's when I heard a knock. 3 soft taps on the front door. Startled me. No one ever comes by unannounced anymore. When I opened the door, I saw Helen, my neighbor from across the street. She's about my age, a widow too, always wearing those floral house dresses and a smile that doesn't try too hard. She held a pie in her hands. "You didn't show up at the church luncheon yesterday," she said gently. "I thought I'd check on you." I tried to hide my surprise. "Oh, I must have forgotten," I murmured, stepping aside to let her in. The house smelled faintly of dust and coffee. She set the pie on the counter and looked around. "You've been quiet lately. Everything all right?" I almost said yes. That's what I always say. But the words stuck in my throat. Something about her voice, steady, kind, made the truth want to come out. So I just nodded toward the envelope still lying on the table. She followed my gaze, walked over and read the top page. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, then softened. "Oh, Maggie," she whispered. "They transferred the deed, didn't they?" I didn't need to answer. My silence did it for me. For a while she didn't say anything. She just sat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Then she spoke, her tone steady and low. "You know, when my son sold my car without asking, I thought it was just a mistake. Turned out he'd used my name to cover his debts. Sometimes," she sighed, "the people we love forget we're still people." Her words hit harder than she probably meant them to. I looked down at my hands, those old, tired hands that had built and held and given, and realized we weren't so different, she and I. We'd both been written out of our own stories by people we raised. "I don't know what to do," I said quietly. Helen reached across the table, resting her hand over mine. "You start by remembering this. You're not crazy and you're not alone. They count on your silence, Maggie. Don't give it to them." Her words settled deep inside me, like seeds dropped into soil that had long been dry. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt seen. We talked for hours. About husbands gone too soon, about sons we used to trust, about the strange cruelty of getting older in a world that treats age like a weakness. Before she left, she said, "If you ever need a ride to town or someone to sit with, you know where I am." After she was gone, I sat there staring at the half-eaten pie. The crust was still warm. Sweetness lingered in the air. For once, the house didn't feel so empty. It felt waiting. And as the clock ticked softly beside me, I realized something simple but powerful. Maybe I didn't need to fight them alone. After Helen left, the house felt different. Not lighter exactly, just less hollow. Her words kept circling in my mind. "They count on your silence, Maggie. Don't give it to them." That night, I sat at my desk in the small study my husband once used. The lamp flickered, its yellow glow catching on old photo frames and unopened envelopes. For years I'd avoided this room. Too many memories, too many ghosts. But now it felt like the right place to start. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Home. Inside were old receipts, mortgage statements, letters from the bank. I ran my fingers across the pages, feeling the weight of decades pressed between them. Every signature, every payment, every line of ink told the same story. This house was mine. And then I saw something else. A copy of the insurance forms Hannah had brought over last year. The ones I'd signed without reading. I compared the signatures, the dates. The deception was clear as daylight now. She hadn't just taken my trust, she'd used it as ink. My hands shook, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was focused. I took a blank sheet of paper and began to write. Not a letter, but a record. Every incident, every date, every conversation I could remember. From the funeral to the insurance update, to the day she told me I wasn't welcome on Mother's Day. Line by line I wrote it all down. When I was done, I placed the pages neatly in a folder marked for the lawyer. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was acknowledgement. Proof that I hadn't imagined the cruelty. The next morning I called a local attorney whose name Helen had given me. A calm voice answered, professional and distant. "Mrs. Lewis, I'd be happy to review your documents," he said. "Bring whatever you have." I didn't tell my son. I didn't tell anyone. For once I wanted to move in silence. But a silence that acted, not one that hid. Before leaving, I looked around the house one last time. Every object had a memory. The dent in the coffee table from when my son learned to walk, the worn edge of the banister my husband used to grip on bad days. They'd taken my name off the deed, but these things still whispered who I was. At the lawyer's office, the receptionist offered me water. I declined. My hands were steady now. When the attorney asked how I'd discovered the forgery, I told him the truth. By finally looking. He flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. "You may have a case, Mrs. Lewis," he said. "It won't be simple, but you're not powerless." That word, powerless, had followed me for years. But hearing it paired with not felt like sunlight after a long winter. When I left his office, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone waking up. I stopped by Helen's house on the way home. She didn't ask for details. She just smiled when she saw me holding that folder. Good, she said softly. It's about time. That night I made tea, opened the window and let the cool air in. The lilacs outside swayed in the wind, their scent stronger than before. For the first time I didn't see them as reminders of what I'd lost. I saw them as proof of what still grew. A week passed after my visit to the lawyer. The world outside went on as if nothing had changed. Kids riding bikes, dogs barking, the mail truck coming at the same time every afternoon. But inside me, something had shifted quietly, like a door unlocking after years of being stuck. I didn't tell Helen what the lawyer said. I didn't even tell myself out loud. Some things lose their power when spoken too soon. Instead, I focused on small actions, the kind that looked ordinary but carried intent. One of those actions was the letter. I started writing it on a Tuesday morning when the air still smelled like rain. It wasn't to the lawyer or the bank. It was to Hannah. I began simply, "Dear Hannah, I hope you're well." And then I stopped. For a long time. The pen hovered over the page, my hand unsure what came next. I thought about all the things I wanted to say, the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd smiled while erasing my name. But anger wasn't the language I wanted to speak anymore. So I wrote this instead. One day you'll be a mother-in-law too. And when that day comes, I hope your kindness outweighs your pride. I forgive you not because you deserve it but because I deserve peace. The words came easier after that. Calm, controlled, sharp in their simplicity. I sealed the envelope, wrote her name on the front and placed it by the window. The sunlight caught it just right, pure, unbothered. For a moment I imagined her reading it, her face softening, her heart twisting just a little. But I didn't mail it. Some messages don't need to travel far. They just need to exist. That evening my son called. It was the first time in months. His voice was cautious, practiced. "Mom," he said, "Hannah told me you've been talking to people. About the house." I didn't answer right away. I could hear the fear under his tone. Not fear for me, but fear of losing what they thought they'd already taken. "Yes," I said finally. "I've been talking." Silence stretched between us, thick and uneasy. Then he said, "You didn't have to make this complicated." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Oh, sweetheart," I replied softly, "you're the ones who made it simple. You took what wasn't yours. I'm just reminding the world of what was mine." He didn't respond. Just a long exhale, and then the line went dead. After I hung up, I moved the unsent letter to my bookshelf, between an old family album and a worn copy of my husband's Bible. It didn't need to reach her. The act of writing it was enough. That night, as the moonlight crept across the room, I whispered to the darkness, "You can't fight dirt by rolling in it. You wash your hands and you walk away." The house was still, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean. Somewhere deep inside I could feel the first stirrings of peace. Quiet, steady, and entirely mine. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. These days silence felt kinder than conversation, but something in me said, "Pick up." "Mom." It was my son. His voice sounded different this time. Smaller. We need to talk." I didn't say anything. Just listened. I could hear Hannah in the background, whispering, her tone sharp, panicked. He must have stepped outside because the next sound was the wind. "There's been an issue," he said, his words trembling. "The lawyer you spoke to, he called us. He said you're challenging the deed." "Yes," I replied, my voice calm. "Because it's mine." He went quiet. I could almost feel him searching for the right words, the kind that might undo the truth. "Hannah didn't mean any harm," he started, the same old defense. "She just thought that I'd die soon." I interrupted softly. "That it'd be easier if I was already gone?" The silence that followed was long and heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know what she'd done." I believed him, and that hurt even more. Not because he lied, but because he didn't care enough to ask before. "I know," I said gently. "You never do." He sniffled, tried to gather himself. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "This isn't about punishment. It's about truth. You let her build her life on my kindness. I just stopped building the foundation for her." In the background I heard Hannah shout, "She's ruining everything." I almost laughed. Everything to her meant comfort. To me it meant peace. "You both made your choices," I said finally. "How I'm making mine." He didn't reply. Just a quiet click and the line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone for a while, feeling no anger, no victory, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm when you realize the house is still standing. I whispered to myself, "You can't take away what was never yours to begin with." Outside, the wind carried the scent of lilacs through the open window. And for the first time the air felt clean again. The morning after that call, the house was unusually bright. The sun slipped through the curtains like it had been waiting for permission to enter. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the smell filling every corner of the kitchen. For the first time in months, it didn't smell like loneliness. It smelled like home. There were no more envelopes on the table. No more unsigned papers, no more hollow apologies. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the soft ticking of the old clock that had belonged to my mother. I sat down and opened the small box that held my husband's wedding band. It still gleamed faintly even after all these years. I placed it next to my cup and whispered, "I think I finally understand what you meant by, let them go." Letting go, I realized, wasn't about forgiving what they'd done. It was about freeing myself from the version of love that demanded silence. Outside, the lilacs were in full bloom again. Their color brighter than ever, their scent spilling through the window like a soft hymn. I took my cup and stepped out to the porch. The air was cool, the kind that wakes you up gently. Across the street, Helen was watering her roses. She waved when she saw me. I waved back. She crossed over a few minutes later, 2 cups of tea in her hands. "You look lighter," she said, handing me one. "I feel lighter," I replied. "The lawyer said the case will take time, but time doesn't scare me anymore." She smiled knowingly. That's how freedom starts, quietly. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea and listening to the wind move through the trees. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. When Helen left, I stayed outside a little longer, watching the world move. Children played down the block. Someone was grilling in the distance. It felt ordinary, and that was the gift. I walked back inside and took one last look around. The same house. The same walls. But I saw it differently now. Not as a battlefield, but as a record of endurance. Every scratch, every faded mark, proof that I'd lived and loved here fully. I went to my desk, took out the old family album and placed a new photo inside. One Helen had taken a few days ago. It was me standing by the lilacs, smiling. Just me. Underneath it, I wrote in neat cursive, "For the years I spent waiting for their love, I now give that love to myself." Then I closed the album and whispered to the empty room, "It's enough." As the day slipped into evening, I turned on the porch light, not because I expected anyone to come, but because light, like love, shouldn't be wasted. I sat back, the glow wrapping around me, gentle and steady. "I'm glad you're here," I said softly to whoever was listening. "Follow my story until the end, because this time the ending is mine." And for the first time I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free.